In the world of spirits and cocktails, a glass is not just a glass, but a good conversation and experience. This is Kaan Büyükköprü, and today I am around the glass with Greg Rutkowski. Greg, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Greg, are your friends thinking about you sometimes? That Greg, are you crazy? Like you're distilling agave spirits and you moved to Mexico for that? What are they thinking about you?
Yeah, I think they're maybe watching my Facebook and wondering what the heck is going on with me and all the crazy things that I'm doing out here in Mexico. I could only imagine what they're saying to themselves. Yeah.
How did it started? Where did this idea come up to your mind?
Well, I'm part Mexican and part Polish, so I grew up in I guess semi-Mexican family in Chicago. My grandma's from Guadalajara, and then I had a Polish grandfather that refugeed to Mexico during World War II. Um, and so I've always been around tequila and mezcal. All of my Polish relatives would drink it with my Mexican relatives. So I started getting really into it when after college. Mezcal cocktails started being a really popular thing in Chicago, and it kind of led me down a really deep rabbit hole. And I started collecting a lot of agave spirits. Eventually, I fell in love here in Puerto Vallarta, and I moved to Mexico 3 years ago and started a distillery here called Finca 18. And 3 years later, here we are today.
Wow, sounds crazy, but at the same time super fun. Right now, are you distilling not only tequilas or mezcals, but whole agave spirits? Am I correct?
Yeah, so we're considered agave spirits. We can't call it tequila or raicilla or mezcal, just because we don't participate in the governing bodies that allow you to call it that. So essentially, we're making like an uncertified agave spirit. And
So
what's interesting about what's interesting about us though is that we're in the tequila region here. We work with tequila agaves, but we use more artisanal processes like mezcal. So you kind of get a little bit more kind of like wild tasting tequila. Tastes a little bit more earthy, minerally, even a little smoky too.
right now, not only in Mexico or not only in the US, but in the whole world, agave spirits are getting quite popular and popular every day. Why do you think we are talking a lot about agave spirits nowadays?
I'm guessing it's for the same exact reason why I'm here, and there's just so much diversity in the flavor profiles. There's so many different stories that need to be told, and there's a lot of history going back 400 years or more with agave spirits distillation and agave fermentation, possibly dating back 12,000 years. So it's a really long history. It's an interesting history. Um, it kind of reminds you of the Wild West a little bit. There's a lot of like clandestine distillers here today, even still in Mexico. Um, and there's just so much diversity, and I think everybody who drinks can identify with some segment of the agave spirits world.
Now there are many different varieties when it comes to agave spirits. Everybody sure knows about tequila. Most people know about mezcal. But as you said, there are different regulations and different actually topics around it. So, like, what are you doing? What are you distilling at Finca 18 right now? And what is your role in this position actually? Because it's also quite excited and quite exciting for people who are thinking to open up or who are thinking to move to Mexico for that. I'm sure about it.
Yeah, so right now we're exclusively working with the blue Weber agave, agave azul, uh, only for the fact that it's really easy for us to get in our area. There's a lot of diversity with agaves, but the price is 10 to 15 times more than the agave azul right now. So for the next for the foreseeable future, we're working with the blue agave used to make tequila. The agaves that we actually use are certified tequila agaves. And my role here is kind of twofold. We focus a lot on education and hospitality here at Finca de 18. We do a lot of like tours and things like that. Um, so it's a really great responsibility to be able to properly communicate what agave spirits are to people who might not necessarily know anything about it. Um, so we really here at Finca de 18 think it's really important to um, treat the way we educate people with a lot of respect. But also my other function here is I'm the master distiller, so I'm in charge of taking this big ball that could weigh up to 130 kilos, chop it up, cook it, mash it, everything, ferment it, and turn it into a really delicious spirit that everybody will enjoy.
You're the right person to ask those production process questions, actually, since you're the master
Yes.
distiller. Before we jump into this topic, uh, let's let's clear people's mind about this topic also. What is agave spritz? What is tequila, mezcals, and the other different categories when it comes to Mexican spirits? Why people are getting a bit confused about these categories or these names?
If you ask that same question to different people in different parts of Mexico, you're going to get 100 different answers. I have the privilege being from the outside, kind of looking in, so I could kind of maybe distill it down a little bit easier than a lot of people. But the idea here is that agave spirits are a alcohol elaborated from the cooked agave. Or there's another type of like sap that the agave can create inside called pulque. Only a few varieties do it. You could also make spirits with a fermented agave sap. And that could kind of fall in the same category. So really, it's anything a distillate, anything coming from any type of sugars that the agave can create would be an agave spirit to me. And then when you start talking about tequila and mezcal, raicilla, bacanora, sotol, and all these things, the way I like to explain it is it's just the types of agaves they're using and where they make it. There's a lot of like small differences between different producers, different regions, and things like that. But everybody's making agave spirits. And then if you want to kind of define it a little bit more, it's the agaves that they're using, the species, and then where they do it.
So, for the more agave spirit connoisseurs, how can we divide when it comes to the production processes between tequila, mezcal, and the agave spirits mainly? Is there any particular distillation times, or is there any particular when it comes to the fermentation process, for example?
So a lot of people think of tequila as something thinner than a mezcal, like it's not smoky. Mezcal has kind of like a positioning of it being smoky, but tequila also could be smoky, and mezcal could not have those smoky flavors if they use more industrial processes. So I would say that tequila is a little bit further along in commercializing itself. By well, maybe not a little bit, by a couple hundred years, really. They're using steam to cook the agaves, which doesn't create any smoke flavor. They're using steam to heat up the stills. They're only using the liquid to ferment, where in mezcal they might use fibers with the agave juice too. So there's some differences, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's not like a rule. And you're gonna see. smoky tequilas. You're going to see clean mezcals. Um, it, it just all depends on the process that the distiller chooses to perform when he's elaborating a distillate.
It might be mainly if we think about the Scotch whiskies, for example, like there are peated Scotch whiskies and non-peated Scotch whiskies. So might be a similar case when it comes to cooking agaves with uh, something else or cooking with steams.
Yeah, for example, yesterday we cooked agaves in our underground pit and we used firewood for it. So the firewood's going to add some of those kind of more smoky, earthy mineral notes, versus steam. When you're cooking with steam, you might get more fruity, floral notes like that.
So let's start from the scratch. Actually, I assume you have a huge plantation of agaves, piñas. Like how do we see the final product from the beginning? Actually, you are in charge of the plantation as well. You take care of each and every piña that you get it from the field as well.
Yeah, so all of our agave right now are pretty young, so they're not at the mature age to be able to process. We have about, I would say, 25,000 of our own agaves here, but they're also young, and for this reason, we're working with local agave growers who have mature agave that might be 3 or 4 years ahead of us. Um, and we work closely with them. We choose the right time to harvest different batches of agave at different times of year. So the most important thing that I always tell people is sugar, sugar, sugar. Without sugar, we can't make alcohol. So it's really important that we're testing the agaves to make sure that it has the proper sugar amount, so we could be a little bit more sustainable, because agaves tend to have higher sugar in different parts of the year than other years. It just kind of depends on how much rain you get during the year. Even last year affects the sugar content. So we're always checking sugar content. It's probably the once you get that right, everything else is a lot easier.
So you have to wait a bit of years before you cutting it. This is the main thing with agave spirits. They are born aged. You need to let
Yes.
them age a bit before cutting it. So for the audience, you wait for around 4 years. Then how do you start the production process? You start cutting them and bringing back to the distilleries.
Yeah, so there's a special job that a person has to do the harvest the agave. It's called the himador. Maybe you've heard of it, but it's
Yeah.
a guy with either an axe, machete, or a special tool called a koa, and he basically shaves all the spiky leaves off the agave. They get loaded onto the truck, and then the agaves get delivered here. At which point we'll have to chop them in half if they're larger, or even sometimes quarters if they're really, really big, because we want to get an even cook throughout the entire agave. We don't want one side of the agave to be half cooked and then the other side to be really cooked. It's kind of like a steak almost. If you have a really thick steak, you either have to, you have to ensure that both sides are cooked properly. And I guess we don't flip the agaves over per se, but we cut them in half to make sure we get an even cook. So cooking
That,
is the most important part after the harvest.
okay. When you are done with cooking, they are ready to be fermented. This is the next process.
The next step is actually breaking the cooked agave down. And so we take machetes and we chop it up into maybe fist-sized pieces. And then we pass it through like a mulcher, like a little machine that shreds the fibers. And we want to make it look like your hair. We want to shred the agave so it's so thin. The reason being is that we want to make sure the yeast are able to eat all of the sugar. Because if we just threw big chunks of agave into the fermentation, we'll have a lot of residual sugar left over that wasn't consumed by the yeast. So the second part after cooking is actually milling.
Okay.
Yep.
So you are done with milling. You were looking for the sugar. Now the sugary juice is over there. It's time to ferment them. Until this part,
Yeah.
how long does it take when you have the agave to be ready on the field and until the fermentation process?
It'll be about 4 to 5 days. So 3 days cooking. The agaves will once they get delivered, they'll just sit here for a day, and then after we open the oven, it'll sit for another day because we're trying to get yeast on the agave. We're trying to attract the natural microorganisms in the area to start actually fermenting the agave. Even while we're milling it, fermentation is taking place.
Wow. Okay. Then of course the fermentation. You need to create the alcohol.
Yep.
You're using your own yeast. I know that distilleries are quite proud of their yeast as well. What is the role of the yeast in the fermentation process and in general in the production process, actually, when it comes to the aroma and flavor profile of your final product?
The main idea is that yeasts are converting sugar to make alcohol, but it's actually doing so much more too. You're adding a lot of flavors depending on the types of yeast um, that are in your fermentation tank. We like to say that fermentation is a sanitation process. So as you're creating alcohol, you're actually cleaning your fermentation too. You're cleaning the liquid, you're cleaning out all the bacteria and things like that. But there's a lot of flavor being created just by fermenting. That's for sure. Yeah, and we do a dry fermentation for 3 days. After 3 days, we're going to add warm water, assuming that the we think that the yeast colony it has been propagated to where once we add water, it could start kind of reproducing and eating sugar throughout the rest of the fermentation tank.
You
So
really
the entire the entire fermentation process might take 14 to about 30 days.
Oh, okay. That's a quite a long time, actually. You are really looking forward to have those sugars, actually, and turning into alcohol. All right, you're done with the fermentation. You have your, can we call it pulque at this point? The alcoholic beverage
We
that
would
you're having?
you here in Mexico we would call it a musto. When you're fermenting, it's called a musto. Pulque is something different. Um, in this case, this would be called a musto.
Okay. When you have your musto, then it's time to distill it. How many times are you
Mhm.
distilling, and what is important about distillation process?
We distill 2 to 3 times depending on what we're doing here on the ranch. The important thing here is that we're concentrating the alcohol um, to get more flavor, to get more body in the mouthfeel. We have to go really, really slow. We also have to heat the still up really slow because we don't want the fibers to burn the inside of the still. So it's very important that we everything we do here is very, very slow and takes a lot of patience. That's for sure. But after the first distillation, we take the fiber out of the still. We don't need them anymore. It's really acidic. It actually just becomes compost. And then we take the liquid that we've collected, which is called ordinario here in Mexico, and then we distill it one more time to achieve a alcohol gradation of about maybe 60 to 70%.
Then your final product is ready, but are you aging any of your spirits or completely you don't age them?
All of our spirits go through some sort of rectification or aging. Rectification is just after we've collected the spirits and then we've maybe proofed it down. It'll just sit in a tank, just resting There's a lot of volatile chemicals, and it could be like really spicy in the mouth, like the feel if you try to drink it right away. So it's nice to just let it rest for 3 to 6 months. We also do some aging where we put the spirits into these glass jugs and we put them into our cave. We also do some barrel aging as well. We make a really cool reposado here with brand new American oak barrels. So um, there's a lot of stuff that goes on even after distillation. That's for sure.
That sound is not something so small feat actually. It's a huge process, and you need to give everything uh, in this. So I'm super curious about like how does your daily life looks like? Are you living near to the distillery, or is it really a hard job for people who are thinking to open up a distillery or becoming a master distiller?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of a lot of things I would do differently if I had to do it again. We're here in Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, Mexico, and it's a very tropical area here. I wish I lived at the distillery. That would be amazing, but I don't. I live about a half hour away, so I have to travel here every day. But my day is different daily. Basically, it changes just depending on what needs to be done and what's going on, what season it is, and all that stuff. But I can tell you that if you're going to start a distillery, um, don't try to do everything yourself. It takes a team. It takes a really talented team. Try to hire the best coaches or mentors or anybody that you can to help you out to start it, because there is a lot involved. If you've never done it before, too, like you know, you're gonna be doing things you didn't even plan for or think about. So a lot of mistakes can be made, which translates to a lot of money being lost. So I think instead of making those mistakes, kind of use that money that you probably would have lost on the mistakes and hire somebody that has a significant more experience than you.
Mhm. That's that sounds exciting, but big responsibility. So I will come to the story of Finca 38 and Finca 18 and 30 Topes. What is the difference between
Yeah,
those two brands
that's a
for
great
you?
question. Yeah, we really like our freedom here. We like to express our freedoms, and there's something called mixtos. And it's agave spirit that's mixed with some other kind of sugar. And Treinta Topes is a mixto that's mixed with 80% blue agave, but it's also mixed with 20%. It's it's called piloncillo. It's a processed cane sugar here in Mexico. It's pretty specialized to Mexico, and we wanted to show people that not all mixtos can be of bad quality. Mixtos have a really bad reputation for being very cheap and giving you terrible hangovers, but we wanted to kind of change people's minds on what a mixto could actually be, because mixtos have been around in Mexico for at least a couple hundred years now, and they've been misrepresented. A lot of traditional producers actually make mixtos, and they don't tell you just because it's something their family's been doing, but they know that mixto has a bad reputation, so they're not really what would I like to say? Um, they don't like to tell people the exact process. Basically, they're not they can't be as transparent as they want to be. But for us, we like to do whatever we want out here. We don't really have too many rules or anything like that, and we're completely transparent about what we do. So in our minds, Treinta Topes is a very transparent brand, and it's about bringing traditional agave spirits in a transparent way to the market.
That's super experimental for me. What you're doing, not just sticking to one idea behind it. It's at the end the aroma and flavors of what your consumers are liking, and apparently your consumers are in love with your spirits. They continue visiting you, having you. So that shows a big experimental love, actually. When it comes to this agave culture, agave spirits are, as we know, very deeply tied with the Mexican culture. But
Mhm.
right now, we know that there are distilleries in South America, distilleries in South
Yeah.
Africa, and Asia. That's a huge trend, not only with the agave spirits, but opening up a distilleries. What do you think of those new movements that is coming from the other part of the world to this agave spirits?
I'm a little bit more open-minded than I would say a lot of people are. You might hear people say that other countries are taking away a product that was made, or a product that is heavily identified with Mexico. But if you look across the beverages world in general, um, alcohol was created, or spirits were created, in the Middle East and possibly even China, and wine has traveled all over the world too, and whiskey. Some of the best whiskeys in the world are, for me, are made in Japan. So I think that if you treat it with respect, and you're trying to make something of good quality, I have no problem with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
You also do educational part, and you do the tasting tours at the distillery for your
Mhm.
consumers. What are they all about, and what people expect if they come and visit you and have some tour from you?
Yeah, so we have a really interesting philosophy on our tastings, and we're really trying to create a very sensorial experience for the person. So if you come to the distillery, you're gonna smell the cooked agave or smell the fermentation. You're gonna taste the cooked agave, taste the fermentation, or if it's coming out of the still, you're gonna taste it directly from the still. So when you're seeing all the parts of the process, once you sit down at the tasting table, everything kind of gets put together for you. And the idea here is to really open people's minds about what agave spirits are, what they could be, and the vast diversity and variety of agave spirits are all over Mexico. So we're trying to basically explode people's palates, explode their minds, um, and the way we do our tastings is by basically by ABV and then by aging. So we'll start with the lowest ABV and work our way up to the highest ABV. And then also, if it's touched a barrel, those will get kind of put at the end as well. Or if they've gone through a third distillation where we're adding ingredients, those will get put towards the end. Um, just because we want to show people the lower ABVs to kind of warm them up, and then kind of introduce them to the base of everything else that we're creating as well. So not only is it about flavor for us, it's about mouthfeel, it's about texture, and all these things. We like to tell people that if you pay attention to how your body feels as you're drinking, it'll add a whole nother dimension to how you taste things.
You're having so many visitors coming and having this experience. I'm curious about, like, is there any unforgettable thing that you think everybody know this about agave spirits or tequila mezcals, but you figured out that people don't know those kind of things? In a nutshell, uh, is there any fact that as a master distiller, you think that everybody should know about in general, spirit categories or agave spirits?
Sure. Agave spirits have an interesting trait to where when the ABV increases, the mouthfeel becomes more like buttery. It becomes thicker in the mouth, and it actually is a little bit easier to drink at the higher ABVs. we found in our experience. So, unlike a whiskey or a rum, it tends to get a little bit harsher to drink. When I think to a certain point, agave spirits tend to get easier to drink the higher ABV it is until a certain point.
Okay,
So
you
that's one
think that
thing. It's one thing people get surprised about. Oh wow, this is 55%. I can't believe it.
okay, so when you have higher ABV, it's more easy to drinkable, or it's more like it's a different, it's wrong perception maybe in our minds.
Yeah, because a lot of people think the higher ABV, the more you're gonna like, it's gonna hurt kind of thing, and when you drink it. Yeah. So I think
Okay.
people get most surprised during the tastings when they find out how high ABV some of our spirits are.
Greg, since you do many experimental distillation and production processes, is there anything that you follow up in the global scale that makes you very excited about the spirits, or specifically agave spirits? That what do you see for the future? Like, what will be the new exciting innovations in our industry for you?
I think you're seeing things trending back to kind of more artisanal spirits here in Mexico and around the world. People, I think it got so far industrialized with agave spirits that the pendulum is swinging back the other way, and people are seeking out the artisanal producers. The interesting thing for me with that is that you're only able to produce a certain capacity. So if you're an artisanal producer, there's only a very small market that you could serve. So why I think this is interesting is that this gives a lot of other smaller producers the opportunity as the category increases in demand worldwide. This gives a lot of artisanal producers to a chance to export or serve other markets that they might have not had otherwise. And you're able to try a little bit more variety this way too. At the end of the day, it's all about the people and the families that help make it.
Yeah, right. Before we're going to close this nice topic around agave spritz, the people who are going to listen this will more likely to look your expertise in the distillery, to be honest. So before we close it, do you have any recommendation or suggestion for the people who are thinking about distilling agave spritz or opening up distilleries? What should they be expecting when it comes to this, and what should they be ready about it?
When you're distilling, you become a chemical engineer, a mechanical engineer. There's a lot of uh, engineering related things here. And I would say start as small as you can. You could buy a 5 liter still, you could ferment in plastic buckets. Just learn how to convert sugar into alcohol first. Don't don't do what we did and start big. If you're doing it by yourself, start small. Work your way up. Do a lot of experimenting. Pay attention, and you'll get better and better every single batch you do. So as long as you pay attention, um, you know, make your batches a little bit bigger every single time, and eventually you'll have a big distillery.
Wow, that was quite a wrap. Greg, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Khan, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, today around the glass guest was Greg Rutkowski, who is the certified master of agave spritz and the head distiller at Finca 18. And of course, we have talked a lot about agave spritz. Hope you enjoy, and see you in the next episode. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.